Today we have Erik Norman, the FinOps Lead at British Airways. Erik, how are you?
Doing great. Still recovering a little bit. I got a cold and flu over the holidays, but shit happens. But otherwise, no, thanks. I'm fine. And thanks for having me again. Always great to see you.
Yeah, always great to talk to you, man. And holidays are a tough time for our health and for our boys and for our for our weight as well. But it's going to be fun to discuss with you because today we are gonna frame it, around context. And I think context is one of the most important things in FinOps these days, especially to get people around the practice and to buy leadership buy-in from our C-suite. So, to kick things off, what exactly is context-driven FinOps, and why does it matter?
Well, I think it is one of the most important aspects in any discipline that is cross-departmental, because without the context, we might use the same words that have different meanings with different stakeholders. And with stakeholders, I don't only mean personas, I mean really stakeholders within a certain company. Because if you have certain processes that have a certain name in one company, the same name might be different in another company. So it's not that if you go from one company to the next, that you can assume that the same terminology means the same thing again. And it's all about driving that context awareness in all conversations.
Yeah, and we are talking about this building this awareness, but to build that, like how a team should go about assessing, the context for FinOps.
Well, normally they have their own context, which is their team. So they have their background. Let's say it's an engineering team. So they know what risk means for an engineer. So if now they talk to somebody from finance, then risk means something completely different. And so in that sense, I think it is often the bridge between these teams is often the FinOps team. And they should be aware of these contextual differences between teams. And that means they need to provide a new context for these conversations. So when they bridge these conversations between engineering and finance, for example, they should make sure that both understand what they're saying when using these words. So that creates a new context, right? So within context of a FinOps stakeholder meaning, we agree on that we use certain words in a certain way. And that is, again, a new context. And if you don't consider these contexts, then you lose a lot of information on the way, or you have large disconnects or a large misunderstandings that you won't fix.
Yeah, definitely. I think that what you said is pretty interesting because we always talk like talk in the right language for the different personas and adapt and all of that. But what you're saying is like, okay, let's build a common context, and then in that common context we adapt for each of them, and we build like something so the communication is pretty clear, right? And to illustrate this, can you walk us through a situation where the FinOps like standard practice failed because of the context, it wasn't like understood or wasn't fit for the case?
Well, I won't tell you which project it is because I cannot
Yes,
share
of course.
details, but I can talk about it without naming names. So I was hired to build a FinOps platform. And I tried to convince, but the thing is, this is a normal non-tech company. And I tried for weeks and months to convince them that building your own FinOps platform doesn't make sense, right? So the ROI is very low and so on. And we were almost at a point at discussing this to almost shouting at each other, like, you have been hired for this, they told me, do it, right? So they were really insisting on I should build this platform or help them build this FinOps platform. And I was really saying, no, why should we do this? This is nonsense. And it took us several weeks to figure out that within that specific company, a platform is not necessarily a software. Platform for them are the platform teams are providing services through third-party companies and own company, third-party tools and own tools or glue code or whatever. But foremost, the most important thing they do is to provide documentation on how to use it and how to onboard. So their platform is actually a collection of documents on, for example, how to use the FinOps tool, how to get access to the FinOps tool, or also how to create a new AWS account if you need it, right? So there was nothing like a traditional sense of a platform. But since they are used to using platform in this special way, I thought they wanted to build a really proper platform on their own, which obviously wouldn't make sense. So it took us several weeks actually to figure out this disconnect.
That's crazy, and that's about very related to what you talk about context. So, just to dive deep a bit on this, because I think I found it pretty interesting. Is like you were, or the idea was to try and apply, let's say, a more of a what now is called like platform engineering kind of system, where you have like a central base with documentation, templates, and all of that, so people can reuse but apply it more of a on a FinOps, or is it different to what I just said?
No, this is more or less just a central hub for all documentation regarding FinOps tooling.
Okay.
And also there might be some ETL pipelines involved in the
Yeah.
background, which are simply documented there so that the, let's say, consumers of anything FinOps know that it doesn't happen by magic, but somewhere there's a pipeline that gathers information from one tool and injects it to another tool or into a data lake or something like that. So it's definitely not a traditional platform engineering platform.
Okay. No, but it's a very interesting approach, and it's something that I haven't heard of in FinOps, and I find, like, from my experience in DevOps, let's say, which platform engineering was very into, very, like, although with differences, very useful approach. So, you know, to avoid that situation, like to avoid this losing several weeks into that, what you would have done before, if you could, like, go to back and do this assessment better.
Well, it's fairly easy. I would have made sure that my context is the same as the other people's context. And I should have made sure that my interpretation of the specific word platform was actually platform. I'm fairly sure I tried to get to, how can I say, to be sure we are agreeing on what we mean by platform. And I think they simply were so used to using platform in that sense, they didn't think about it. So for them, it was platform.
Mhm.
So yes, sure, we're talking about platform. And I said, well, if we're talking about platform, then it does make sense. And they told, no, we are talking about platform, and it makes absolute sense. So it
That's
was,
interesting. It's like same word for two
yeah,
people. It's totally different thing, right?
yeah. And that, I mean, even led me to creating a now manually created, but a glossary which is context specific. So that means for every entry, like for example, risk,
Mhm.
I provide a terminology that says in the context of this, it means this. So one entry in the glossary has several meanings depending on the context.
Yeah, like in
And
language,
mhm,
it's very
and I
interesting.
think I can anticipate a little bit of here. I am helping a FinOps, sorry, a AI for FinOps platform by curating their content. And I've convinced them to create a context-aware ML platform. So basically what happens is if somebody uses a prompt and the context isn't clear, The AI has been instructed to make sure that the context is clear to avoid misunderstandings.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting, and it's one of the things, like, I have to say that I use, a lot to for the business and for everything, and refining that context, and making it aware and making it efficient, and that it, and let's say, it knows the where it comes from, and what's the context of what you are asking for, is super super crucial for making, like, AI efficient in terms of the outputs you get. So yeah, I think that's the super interesting stuff, and but I want to move on to a bit more step by step thing. So let's say that we are a team, we are in a FinOps team now, and let's say we have figured out this first step, which is like, okay, we know the context, and so now, how does the context-driven FinOps differ depending on the size? Because we have people is listening from a startup, or for a mid-size, or for a large enterprise, and context is super different if you have worked in all those types. So once we understand the context, how does it change between these types of companies?
So in principle, there is no difference in the approach, but in the intensity or amount of work required.
Okay.
So I'll recover the word I said before about bridging conversations, right? Bridging departments with these conversations. So typically, the larger the organization, the further apart are the stakeholders, and the bigger and stronger the bridge must be. In a startup, people developing the product and maybe running them might be the same person. So little effort needs to be done to make them understand themselves. But in any documentation about processes and so on, you should always make sure that the context is clear, and that let's say that the target reader has been at least defined. But otherwise, I mean, the process is the same. You need to make sure that the stakeholders understand each other. It's simply that in smaller companies, they are closer, so you need less effort to bridge these gaps.
Yeah, and I think it's also why, I think that can be applied to almost any type of practice, like not only Finos, but almost everything. Like you
Anything
need,
that's cross-department, right?
yeah, it's way more difficult to, because you have way more layers normally. Like, depends on the company structure and all of that, but you have way more layers to deliver a message. So you need it first to be super clear, two, to be communicated like a lot more to it reaches. It's like you have a lot of people to reach, so you need to communicate a lot more. And three, to make it like simple, so that it's easy to understand. Like, it's not the same to when you are talking, let's say, not talking to yourself, but you are understanding something, and when you're trying to explain to someone else, it's like you need to simplify things and to make it super clear, so that the message is understood. So as much people you deliver this message, the more, let's say, simple, or the more clear it needs to be to deliver that to their people. So very interesting analysis that you just made. And can you give us an, let's say, one specific FinOps practice that you think it changes between being in a startup or being in a large org, that you think it's super different from one to the other size of companies?
I would say the biggest change that you see is how easy it is to hide in a large organization.
Yeah.
And with that, I talk about accountability. So if you've done any large migration to the cloud or from the cloud or whatever data center migrations, you will realize there are plenty of applications that nobody even knows who they belong to. So there's plenty of that as a large problem. You can obviously have that in a startup, that somebody tries something and forgets to delete it from the infrastructure, and then it just keeps running or just keeps generating costs. You have that as well, but how can I say, how much it changes across the size is exactly this. The accountability is much more difficult to achieve in a large organization. and the transparency also. And the further away the teams are from each other, the more difficult it becomes also to make the first step into collaboration. Let's say, for example, I join a new large organization. They haven't done anything FinOps so far. They just migrated to the cloud. And there are teams in there that probably even don't know that they should own certain applications, because before they didn't care. It was just running in the infrastructure. Why should now care that they are in the cloud? Because cloud is just on somebody else's computer, right? So
Yeah.
you see this disconnect. And the thing is, what happens if you try to reach out to these teams, then you have this natural reaction of help. Now somebody's going to monitor us. They're going to evaluate us. They don't know the metrics. They don't know, are they the good guys? Are they performing badly? They have no idea. So they have almost this panic reaction to no, you cannot talk to us, or you should not talk to us. We won't share any information. They want to be left alone, because they don't know if they are going to make, how can I say, a good impression or a bad impression. I've even heard excuses like GDPR, that I should not look into cost data because of GDPR. And then it's like, okay, so the challenge here, and which is the biggest difference between small organizations or small startups and large enterprises, is how you convey the message of you want to look into certain stuff.
That's very very insightful. I haven't thought. Well, I had to be honest. I had some issues about access data when I tried to investigate FinOps on some companies, but it was like, yeah, I never thought about like, yeah, GDPR. I was like,
Yeah,
what the
because
hell?
you come there with good intentions.
Yeah,
So one part of your brain says that whatever you ask, all the others are going to interpret it as good intentions.
yeah, and also because let's say that you are, let's say, a white hat security guy, and you are doing like that, and they were saying like, yeah, you cannot access that data because it's GDPR protected. And I was like, how I'm going to protect you from breaching, let's say, GDPR if you don't let me access? It's like doesn't make any sense. Okay, that's a super cool analysis. And talking about mistakes or issues, what do you think is the biggest mistake you have seen like teams make when they are trying to actually implement FinOps?
I would say I would call it imposing FinOps on everyone.
Okay. Yeah.
Because we are fairly passionate about our jobs. We know that
Mhm.
if teams would apply certain changes that we recommend, even with not only I don't talking about recommendations about right sizing or anything, but also to become more transparent in the reporting and all of that. And there are plenty of advantages to be had, right? But if we impose it as such, then we can come across as, how can I say, as not considering the challenges they are already facing. The typical ones are the operation teams. They are typically stretched thin. They're running large amounts of infrastructure, and they don't want any bells to go off during the weekend, if possible, right?
Yeah.
So if we go there and say, hey, if you start cost-aware thinking and this and that, then their own reaction will be, then I will have more alarms during the weekend. So what I try normally to do is I try to, rather than spamming out knowledge, insights, information, recommendation, and so on, I try to invert the FinOps flow, as in make every documentation as possible, as available as possible, almost like in self-service FinOps. If you need something, access to reports and stuff, just have a page with all the links that you need. There you can access it. Then, obviously, you need executive buy-in and so on. You need to drive somehow the importance of, if we do some budget cuts for the cloud spend, then there should be a round mail that says, and next year or next quarter, we're going to look into some optimization. So they should have the motivation to go to the FinOps team and ask for advice instead. How can we even get to know our costs? Where are they? Like, and then you point to the, here is the onboarding page. Oh, thank you. And then you already build some, because you already helped them. Then you build that, how can I say, this trust and this collaboration and this these relationships you have with these teams. And then you help them more and more, but when they come to you. But if you try to brute force FinOps into a large org, you need like a 5 times bigger FinOps team, and it will take probably as twice as much time.
Yeah, that's like very very interesting, because normally it's like, you people talk like doing one practice or the other, one thing or the other, optimizing more, optimizing less, focusing on one thing and the other. And this was very, very different, and I think more comes from a more, let's say, experience side that you have come from, rather than, okay, this is the theory, this is what the things normally happen. And it's very insightful. And
I'm curious,
so
let's see, do you
yeah.
think for the FinOps team themselves, what do you think the main advantage of this approach is?
So for doing like for not, let's say, imposing FinOps, but
Being
rather,
reactive instead of proactive.
so I would say it's like people would probably be more let's say, involved in the process, what you said. So like
Which
if you
people
do
do you
it.
mean? FinOps people or
No,
other?
the rest of the stakeholders. So the way that you say it, and correct me if I understood it wrong, but from what I understand and from what you say, is like, you make it like, okay, here's what you provide tools, you provide the ability, you enable, you empower the rest of the organization to embed FinOps in their practice. You not in self-impose it, but rather, they embed it, so it's part of you embed it into their normal workflow, so that they can apply it directly, and you don't have to like do this and write this. So you enable, and that's how I understood it, for especially for large sources. It's like you have FinOps people that are, let's say, the ones that curate, the one that understand the whole thing, and they enable the rest of the company depending on the department, like finance, procurement, engineering, with the right tools for the right people, so that they can apply FinOps on their different cycles, because their cycles are different. So that's my take on
You're
this.
in the right direction, but you don't know why. That's my take on you. So let me add one more, repeat one more word,
Mhm.
flow. So we have inverted the flow. So when people reach out to you and ask you for information, and you only talk to those, almost 100% of your work time will be invested in people who are willing to listen. If you
Yeah.
try to reach everyone in the organization and only 10% are interested in what you have to say, then only 10% of your work time will be conversations with people who want to listen.
Yeah, and but don't you think, like, for starting a practice, like, like the case that you just said, no FinOps whatsoever, don't you think you need to balance that, like, between talking to the people that are interested? Because I think those are like your champions, your leverage that you need to pull, so that FinOps works in the company, but also doing some, like, like, spreading the word and see what it
General
sticks.
awareness, but yes, but that could be also a newsletter
Yeah.
inside the company, or also one presentation at a all hands on meeting,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
then you have your 5 minute spot and you say something like, hey, we know there are going to be some budget cuts on our cloud spend next year. If you want to have some help on how to figure out how to achieve that, here are my contact details. Done.
Yeah.
Because
I
then
also,
you lay out the problem for them and you are going to help them with that problem.
yeah, yeah, I would agree on that as well. Like, you need to do, a kind of word spreading, because otherwise, like, no one is going to know about your existence. But
Sure.
on that, from there, you get like the interested people. I can say that from the topics that all the talks and all of that my company has gained from years, I only, let's say, was interested in like three. One was Dora, one was Google Cloud, and the other one was the last one was FinOps. And whenever there was a FinOps thing or whatever, I just I researched like FinOps in the intranet or something around, or Cloud Cost or whatever, so that and those people, I think, are the what we said, the leverage that you need, and you probably can find it with that. You just need to, at the beginning, I think it's more like awareness, and then not, let's say, pursue them, or like, yeah, go behind everyone and go behind the large levels. It's like, the champions will build, and will try to build fitness from the, let's say, from the bottom, so that the practice sticks in the company. And talking about the thriving and making FinOps succeed. So what we just talked about, what do you think are the from the FinOps role, what separates people that really consistently stick into FinOps role, and can grow their career in FinOps, to the ones that are struggling to find a role, or struggling to find the right place for their practice?
I'm not sure about finding roles, because that's not really my, how can I say, my focus.
Mm-hmm.
Because also myself, sometimes between projects, it takes more time for me to find the new
Yeah.
role I would like. So I'm definitely not trying to dish out any recommendations here. But I think within an organization, those who can, how to say, make their career in FinOps, I would say the big difference is, and I know I will put it back to the context, to understand what context you're in and what context you want to be in your next role. For example, you yourself have worked or are interested in FinOps now for some time, right? Was there already an existing FinOps practice at your company?
No, or it was very early, I would say, when I
It was
started
early on.
interested.
Now
Yeah, it
imagine
wasn't the
that,
cause, by the way.
and now imagine that you have somebody else with a similar amount of experience that worked in a well-established FinOps practice and just, joined a running organization and everything was laid out. So there's a huge difference in experience between starting FinOps and joining something at a high maturity level and making it run. So one is more almost like a controlling experience. The other one is really like a founder experience. So I see there is a really big difference on, and there depends. For example, if you have 5 years in FinOps and you are say, oh, I want to become a FinOps lead, then if you don't have any experience in kickstarting a FinOps journey, you will have a very hard time if you land in an organization that wants to, spearhead a new FinOps initiative or start really from scratch. So your question itself, basically, who will thrive and who will struggle, depends on the context they're currently in and the context they will be in the next role.
Yeah.
So I say, if you want to learn how to kickstart a FinOps journey, then join an organization where they are about to start FinOps from scratch. That will give you a huge amount of experience, but any experience you have from a well-oiled machinery at high maturity levels won't really be helpful. They will actually work against you at the moment, because you're used to having good reporting data quality. You're used to that. If you reach out to people, they will reply, and so on. So, for example, just for fun, when I do interview questions or stuff like that, most of the people that I know, and even the seasoned ones, they don't pass my first question if I am interviewing for a FinOps lead. And that is what to do in the first couple of weeks. Because they're so used to have access to people, information, and documentation. So they skip the whole part of even finding out who to talk to, to maybe find out who you should ask the question to. And then maybe also find out when to ask this question, because maybe there's something more important going on than FinOps. So it's a huge, huge, huge difference between starting a FinOps journey and joining later on.
Yeah, I think that totally relates on. I think can relate a lot with business. Like it's not the same to build something like from scratch and from the first one to have a start in a business that has already all the systems, everything in place, all it's working, and it's like that's the easy part. Like when you are working from scratch and building it all yourself or with with the help, and then you are seeing the evolution of it. You have suffered all the evolution. You know all the stages, and since you know all the stages, you have, let's say, all the experience in your head to say like, okay, what's the context of this company? Is this a retail company? So the FinOps focus on one thing. Or I recall the Ryanair's case is like they are obsessed with the margin. So like a minimum change in the margin is like something that very affects. But some other companies is not the right context for them. So when you have built something from scratch, I think you'll be, I totally agree on that comment that you made. And for people, let's say people that are in different contexts, but they are new to FinOps, so they are starting to build a practice maybe in the company now that a lot of companies are building. What do you think are 3 misconceptions that they could avoid that you see very frequently in the ecosystem?
I would say one particular is that it is an engineering challenge to start with, and therefore almost delegate to engineering all this responsibility and accountability. It's almost like going to an operations team and saying, can you make this cheaper? And so I would say that will bring you only the low-hanging fruits and will run out of opportunities after some time. So I would say the biggest misconception here is that the engineers actually decide the cost structure. They do, but it's because they're filling gaps that somebody else left in the documentation or specification. That is what
I would agree. And I normally, like, because I come from the engineering side, I take bold things on this, but I also agree that you are making the decision based of what you know, but if you don't have all the context, you are doing things that is affecting other things that you really don't know. So like
Yeah, or
you
you
are
go
taking
by familiarity because you have always built the systems in a certain way. And for most cases, it's good enough. But I mean, let's talk, for example, you mentioned retail. Let's take a retail application. Okay. So, for example, it's a good thing to enable compression, right? For anything cloud, backend, or websites and so on, compression is a good thing, right? And I say, not necessarily. It depends how your API is built, how your application is built. Because if you have, let's call it a thin client, so that every user interaction goes to a cloud backend, then you have plenty of mini interactions, so very small payloads and many interactions. If you turn on compression, the compression library that's also sent as a header as part of the content will be bigger than the payload itself.
Yeah.
So actually made it worse. So you have more volume that you're pushing through, and you're also adding some compute time to compress and decompress. So in that sense, if you don't know what you're sending across, then you should not make decisions about the architecture.
Yeah,
And for
that's that.
example, talking about compression, there's a couple of things that are very interesting. Apart from that, I learned about this new JSON alternative. It's called token-oriented object notation, so TOON. and it's basically much more compact than JSON, but has exactly the same information. So it has an a parse and encode, or stringify or whatever.
Yeah.
And so it does the same as JSON,
Hmm.
but it reduces the volume by between 20 and 50%. So you could simply use another content format. But also one other thing is, it depends on the scale that you're running. Let's say that you have an intranet application for your orders that run from the desks in the shop, okay? Or a counter in a airport terminal, right? Now, the thing is, if you have a limited amount of connected clients, you could run stateful compression, if you know what that is. So for anyone who don't know who that is, it means that basically both the client and the server send the first message uncompressed and learn at the same step to improve the compression over and over. And most importantly, the dictionary, the compression dictionary, is not part of the transmission. So even for short, as in a low payload interactions, even if frequent, that works wonders. You can reduce the volume by 80% easily compared to normal compression.
Yeah. No, that's
But
like,
obviously, that means that on server side, you have more memory consumption because you need to hold all the compression dictionaries there. And also the API must be built for that, you know how many interactions that are, and that you have like connection sessions for each connected client and so on. So, but if there is someone who says, this is the amount of data, and by data I mean collection of information. So I'm not talking about tech necessarily, I'm just talking about information. And you say whether it's transactional, whether it is a stateful API or stateless API, if there's somebody who defines this on a product level, which then goes into the solution architectural team again, they will be able to make those decisions based on that kind of information. But if you just say, build me a web shop, then you will make the usual 3 decisions and leave out any potential optimization from the design point of view.
no, that's very like super super intelligent, and I can relate a lot to that because sometimes, especially in the architectural side, when you are a more high level, like you don't take prior or you evaluate certain things that is like build a website and you say like if your standard practice is microservices or whatsoever, and it's like, are you sure, like given the context of the tool and given all the possibilities that you can do, is this the best thing, or is it just the standard way that and it's like, yeah, this is the way that we do it this way, let's do it this way because everyone knows how to do it. And it's like, yeah, maybe just a monolith with some autoscaler would have worked fine. or even
I'm a
a
big
a
fan
serverless
of
one.
monoliths, actually, to start with.
Yeah,
If you build a modular internally, you can split out any module, so to say, into a microservice whenever that is required because of the scale.
definitely. I like, and even you can then granularize it even more and make it, serverless so that it can be, divided into functions. If you like, you already made it. The only thing is, the split it is need to be done, but it doesn't have to be like, okay, let's build a core, orchestrated thing for for number one thing. So I also love,
Yeah,
the
but
modular
even
model.
if we go down this rabbit hole for a sec, so for example, if you think about the Lambda functions and you think about a web server that has an API, you have like paths and handlers.
Mhm.
You could actually transform back and forth serverless to a web server with almost no code changes if you structure your project
Yeah,
accordingly.
I can say that I have done that, and it was fairly like when I developed a serverless application long time ago for a production. We were basically doing the same that I was doing to develop Python web servers, but for lambdas, and I was like, okay, this is the same thing. I just need to import some AWS library to to do this right. And but I think it was very interesting, and moving back to the FinOps careers, because I think it's a topic that interests a lot to people, and we have this job channel that people are very interacting on, and there is a lot of interaction. So I want to make some projections now that we are in starting the year and everything is like projection
Oh,
and see what
I
things.
forgot one big misconception.
Okay, yeah,
People
please go ahead.
wanting to enter in FinOps. You don't need a technical background.
Yep.
You need to be able to ask the right questions. Yes. But yeah, I would say the best way of optimization is training. Give your engineers time to upskill, ask them the right questions, give them the right information, as for example, of what kind of data will flow through the applications, and leave it to them to come up with the most efficient solutions. So the misconception I find very often, even with seasoned practitioners, is that say, oh, I come from finance, I cannot talk to engineering because I have no technical background. But it's not your job to tell them how to do their job better. They won't like you for that, even if you had a technical background. Trust me, you need to ask them the proper questions that they will then resolve and answer, right?
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think like with roles, like any business or management role, or let's say leadership, and in this case especially finance, where you treat with a lot of things that you may not know, like to the point of mastery. Let's say finance or engineering, you may come from different background. You just need to point right and do the right question, like try to, so that they can explain it to you and see if they can understand, because after all, things need to be understandable to everyone and need to be simplified. And if you read about business and all of that, is systematize, simplify, make it super easy for people to take decisions as quick as possible. So I love that background, and I totally agree on that, because we have seen people like Alexa Abuscato, that we interviewed some weeks ago, that she doesn't come from that. We have a lot of people in the community that come from very multiple backgrounds, that doesn't have to be anything related to tech. So I agree on that. And back to the question that I was seeing, and thinking about this, is like, where do you see the FinOps job going on, or the career going on in the coming years? What do you see the evolution? I think the career and maybe the practice. What do you see it coming?
So FinOps is a fastly growing discipline. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, only in a handful of years, we have gone to just give some recommendations about to increase accountability of cloud costs. Now we're into FinOps Plus, trying to bring some practices to data center management, also other cost types like operational costs like HR and stuff. There are plenty of stuff that we are branching out in many directions. And we are also evolving into other branches like ITAM and TBM. So I see that like software engineering's many decades ago, you had software engineer. That was the one who created software. A couple of plenty of time later, you have now the data analyst, the data scientist, then you have the ML engineer, you have the ML security engineer, and so on. There are so many, plenty of titles growing out because you're covering certain specific stuff. So I think we will have some diversification within FinOps as well, because we are already have the FinOps titles like FinOps engineer, FinOps analyst, and so on in plenty of job offers. So I think there will be some new roles coming up that will depend on what kind of topic we are going to cover within FinOps.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and I also agree on that. I think the practice is going to evolve, and especially with the way it is expanding. and the diverse nature that it has already, like the amount of roles it involves and the amount of context it has, like, especially when it applies to public cloud, like the evolution to englobing like almost all IT spend, like independently of where it comes from. I'm not especially like it doesn't have to be IT, but also the payroll in IT, and how the all the spend it's involving. It's going to be like super diversified, and we are going to be seeing like a lot of specialty to be finished, because I think it's such related to business, and business is such diverse and has a lot of context and different ways to see it, that if it tries to do that and if expanding to that, it's going to be like super specialized and super diversified.
Let's make a bet. How long will it take until we have a FinOps token specialist?
Mm, let's say let's
By
try
token, I
to.
mean obviously AI token.
Yeah. So let's reverse engineer the question. So how much it'll take to have a token, let's say, optimizer in terms of like accuracy? That's
Or
already
FinOps
like
for AI specialist.
that won't take long, because like there is already roles that are trying to optimize in terms of the accuracy, like the let's say scientific part where you're trying to do that. So whenever you make it better, the only thing is that okay, we are spending too much, so we need to optimize the way that that's consumed. And I think like even for some reads that I took and some people that I know, they are already like consulting a bit on that. So I would say in a couple of years, that roles, if the AI evolution continues, probably it will happen. That will be my bet,
I
I would
mean, if
say.
the bubble doesn't burst.
Correct. But yeah, I would say that because I recall when I was doing ML, AI. Well, it was more like AI, but for images and ML. I was on more on the operational part. I was saying like how long it would take for let's say the ML ops to appear, and it took like 1 year and a half since I started researching, and all I knew was researching to me becoming like an MLOps people. And I was like, okay, how the hell do we deploy these things and make it work for an application? So I think it's going to be like if it if the AI continues, which I think it'll be, a couple years we'll have very specialized people into finance for AI, because it's going to be such a cost driver. The same way that we have, item specialized people. It will be that. So that will be my take. What about you? What do you think on that?
I agree. I agree. So I would say
That's
give it a year, 1 year and a half, and we probably will have those job roles on our board.
Yeah, we'll see. I'll analyze that data. I will see what the what the jobs are asking for regarding that. And maybe a final question that I want is to give advice to let's say to the new generations of FinOps, even though they are much older. But if someone is starting on their FinOps journey, what would you recommend to them, both on the learning, on the approach of the story to introducing FinOps?
If they're starting from scratch, as in they've just transitioned over from another
Mm-hmm.
discipline, then I would say do the practitioner's training.
Mm-hmm.
Because while a certificate itself obviously doesn't guarantee you a job or that you're good at that job, you can identify your knowledge gaps very quickly. If you come from engineering, typically you have no idea what unblended and blended costs are. And vice versa. I mean, so you find out what you need to actually do the job, and then you progress from there. If you want to ride the AI wave, you can do the FinOps for AI certifications and learn about that, because it's less about actually learning how to do machine learning and AI. It's more about how to govern it and how to control it. So I would
That's
definitely go pick your direction, because it's no longer like software 30 years ago where you just did software engineering. Now you have to decide from the scratch, more or less, are you going to be a well-rounded, like an all-rounder, or do you want to specify some as a, specialize, on something specific?
Definitely. And with the broader that we just talked, the broader scope is taking, I think especially like either you become a generalist and aim for a more, let's say, management role, I would say, and coordinating that is always become a more, let's say, generalist management role, or you specialize in one area and you become the best for AI optimization. Won't be like nearly similar to doing a storage optimization, to doing, especially when I see like BigQuery, all these BigQuery, Snowflake, data optimization, which like it seems like two different worlds. Like it's super different from when I see other stuff. And when like you cannot be the best, like it's super difficult to is going to be the best, so you need to specialize, and there is like going to be probably plenty of people looking for, let's say, storage optimization, but of course there is a lot of storage management, let's call Canva, for example, that saved like a lot of money on optimizing storage, but also people that are using BigQuery a lot, and it's a huge cost driver. So I think that's a very useful advice. So thanks, Erik, for all your insights today. I think it was very useful and very helpful for the people that listen to us. And hope you will have a great 2026. And thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me again. Looking forward to seeing you again soon.
Yeah, looking forward to it. And to everyone, see you in the next episode. Bye bye.
Yeah, bye.
If you would like to know how someone did wonderful transitions from a non-technical background into FinOps following what you just talked with Erik, don't avoid the possibility to check our episode with Alexa Bruscato, so you can know how she made it to create even her own FinOps newsletter from being an English teacher. Please listen to this episode.